folks. Welcome to the SIG-Testing meeting. And yeah, first topic. If there's anybody new here who wants to go ahead and introduce themselves, feel free to unmute and intro. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Yeah. I'm Solomon. And I'm the founder of Dagger, and before that, Docker. And the reason I'm here with Kyle is I ran into a bunch of maintainers at KubeCon, including Dims and Tim, and I was showing them Dagger and kind of walking them through the latest stuff we've been doing, and they said, "Oh, you should come to SIG-Testing and talk about it, just so that people know it's out there and they can think about whether it can help with some of the CI stuff or not." And so yeah, that's it. And Kyle and I have been doing a little bit of homework. We looked into Prowl and Fino, and then realized, oh no, Fino's been deprecated. And so we're just looking for ways to find out if there are ways we can help. And that's it. Hopefully it's on topic. And yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I saw you have an agenda item as well, so we can get to that after intros. And meanwhile, go ahead.
Can I?
Your turn, Cal.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Danilo. I'm from Red Hat. I'm contributing to Prowl for a while, almost 2 years, and this is the first time that I joined this meeting. I am just a guest. I just came out to say hi and to get to know each other, and that's all. I will be here just as a guest, as a passive listener, and nothing more.
Awesome. Glad to have you.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm Kyle. I'm here with Solomon as well, also with Dagger. Formerly release engineering lead at HashiCorp and other releasing roles before that. So that's kind of my area. So hopefully these are my people.
Hopefully so. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Madhav. I'm one of the tech leads for Contrabacks. I'm a GitHub admin for the project. I was with Dims when we were talking to Solomon about Dagger and how they can get involved in maybe coming to the SIG-Testing meeting. So I'm here following up on that. Thanks, Kyle and Solomon, for following up.
Thanks for the invite.
Cool. Yeah, glad to see a bunch of new folks around. Thanks. Yeah, with that, I think we're probably good on intros. Solomon, if you want to go ahead and start, I think you've got the next item.
Should we maybe, since we have a small meeting and most of the people are new, should we introduce the, like, for example, yourself, Michelle?
Oh, that might be reasonable. Hi, yeah, I'm Michelle. I'm a member of SIG-Testing and also a chair for SIG-Testing. I'm mainly involved on the tooling and infra side of stuff within the Kubernetes project, largely expert on test grid for test history, display, and visualization, as well as part of the on-call rotation for infra. So, yeah. Ben, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Benjamin Elder. I'm on the Kubernetes steering committee. I'm a tech lead for SIG-Testing, and Kate Sempra, formerly a chair for SIG-Testing, kind maintainer, bunch of stuff.
And Antonio?
My name is Antonio Gea. I'm here in SIG-Testing and in networking, and maintained with Benjamin in Kind and doing stuff in Kubernetes all day.
Cool. All right. Now I think you go ahead and kick it off, Solomon.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. So the like Madhav said, we spent some time towards the end of the conference. I think our brains were all fried, and they were walking me through the pretty incredible stack that you all are maintaining. It kind of fried my brain even further, to be honest. But yeah, it got our wheels turning, and we thought, okay, let's maybe just give a quick overview of what we've been up to, and then see if there's any way we can help. Basically, we also we love complicated CI stacks and sort of getting our hands dirty and carving out a little space where help is needed. So we're going to be on the lookout for that. Basically, that's the request. If you can see a way where maybe we can be a good match to help, let us know. So I don't know. Should I just give you a quick summary of what we've been up to at Dagger and see if there's any connections there, and then also I have specific questions on FINO and the specifically local running of jobs, and the experience of doing that from the contributor's point of view, basically, because that's sort of our area of interest. And we tried our best to get up to speed, on our own time, but we may have missed important information.
No, I think that sounds great. The only thing that I might point out is that I don't know if we have all the necessary folks in this room to or rather, I think this will be the start of a conversation. I think this will also be good to carry up offline on Slack and whatnot as well.
Yeah, totally. So
yeah,
how much time should I aim for?
Well, does anybody have anything else that they want to put on the agenda?
I think we're running a bunch of async topics, but nothing for the meeting agenda.
I say go for it.
Okay.
If we have other things, then we can try to time box it.
Yeah, sounds good. And please, interrupt or steer, frame the topics anyway, as much as you like. We're guests, so we're trying to fit in the model here. But yeah. So I guess I'll give a little bit of context on the tool. So we're Dagger's an open source engine that it replaces the mess of bash scripts in YAML that make up the CI in most software projects out there, and we try to break it down and rebuild it as code. So we have this. We define this primitive called Dagger functions. It's an actual function, a Go or Python or TypeScript function, and then we run it in a container and slap a little API on top of it. And the idea is it runs the same locally and in the actual CI server, surprise. And then we try to make it really easy to compose those dynamically. And then we provide primitives for those functions to do useful things with very little code, specifically anything that you might do in a Docker file, so picture an API for a Docker file. So anything that involves moving artifacts around, pulling containers, pulling, a Git repo, copy this file into this container, execute this command, give me standard output, et cetera, et cetera. And then under the hood, it's build kit. So it's the same tech that powers actual Docker build, which means you get caching and all those nice properties. And so basically, we're trying to kind of spin out all that messy logic that sort of takes over in every project as things get more complicated, and make it nicely reproducible and something you can actually reason about and build up in a modular way. And the killer feature is that once you have it in a Dagger function, it runs locally. So there's a sort of a shift left aspect to it where you can actually iterate on that CI job very rapidly and then tweak it just the way you like it, and then once it's working fine locally, then you push it and you configure your CI to run the same thing, and then you just saved yourself possibly a lot of time. So that's the general idea. So we were demoing that, and then that led to, hey, you should go to this SIG-Testing, SIG-Infra discussion, and from there, here we are. Yeah, so that's the idea. So the I don't know exactly where that can help, but I've been focusing my attention on FINO and the ability to run prowl jobs locally. First I didn't see that FINO was deprecated, and so I was thinking, oh, cool. Fino can run a job once it's in a Docker image. So that's done. But the Docker image, you still have to build out of band. And I don't know if a meaningful part of the logic of the job is actually in the image, you still have to have your own glue on top of Fino to have a full, a complete dev loop on that job. So I was going to experiment with, okay, maybe a Dagger function that wraps Fino and does the build on the fly for you would be helpful. But now I don't know what's the status of Fino.
So Fino would have wound up being deprecated because you can just run the actual pods instead.
Okay.
We have a script that lets you. We have a couple of different ways you can do this. There's composable tools, and then we have a script that combines some of them. So the main one is you can run this tool, mkpj, to make an instance of like a stamped out we're going to run a task from the job config. And then from that, you can take, and that's a CRD. Once you have one of those, you can then pipe it to another tool that will actually produce an equivalent pod. So we have a script that combines these and kind to give you can run a pod locally against a local cluster. That's still not going to get you 100% because maybe you have reference secrets or something like that. For the containers, I mean, so most of our projects are in Go, so they're usually not like the container they run in is just sort of an environment that provides like the Go tool chain or something like that. And with Go tool chains support, we had some tooling before that, but now that Go tool chains is available, pretty much all projects are moving towards you're controlling the Go tool chain in repo and your config and like your Go module or something. So the container is just like enough to bootstrap getting your tool chain, and then it'll respect what you have in your repo, and you're going to run something like Go build, Go test, or maybe some test shell script. So
what about integration tests?
It depends. There's a pretty wide variety for what people are doing. There's a lot of dependency on end-to-end with a cluster because people are doing distributed compute technologies. There's some things where people running a local process. Again, they're usually a Go binary. There's a lot of like fetching tooling using like a tools module. That's not everything. There are some projects, for example, Prow itself, that have like some JavaScript or things like that. It's usually not very heavy on that though. Some minimal like web UI to display things. Most things happening in the project are kind of building Kubernetes itself or extending Kubernetes, and those usually looks like a controller or a CLI in Go. So the container that they're running in isn't like that's just to provide a like a compatible enough environment in CI versus your local dev. They aren't really iterating on the container, and most jobs just use a couple of shared images that have like common tool chains like Go and GCC.
Mm.
And with the idea being that we gain some performance by most jobs using the same common image that provides like a Go tool chain, maybe a a kubectl installation that you can rely on if you don't provide your own. Some tools like that, even if it's kind of a large image, because we're actually automatically updating the image to the latest build periodically for all jobs that don't opt out of pinning it. So because we found that most teams weren't paying much attention to the images they're using and aren't iterating on those images. So we actually centrally bump them usually and provide a common one. And if you really care about this, you can bring your own, but it's much more common to see using something like Go toolchains to manage it in repo and get that
I see.
local experience matching.
Yeah.
So I think Dagger sounds like some really cool technology. I'm not sure how close of a fit it is for the like core cube ecosystem.
I mean, someone told me to come here, so I guess you guys were going to tell me, but maybe the answer is wrong meeting.
I don't know. I mean, I think there might be parts of the project. For example, we actually have a bunch of repos that are using GitHub Actions for some of their stuff because people are more familiar with it and it's good enough for what they're doing. There's a really large spread. I mean, this project, I'm sure we have more now. The last time I actually took a count, we had 150 repos. So people are kind of doing everything. And we don't
Yeah.
like centrally mandate too much. Mostly like if you're going to use our infrastructure that we're providing, we have some requirements so that
Yeah.
it's reasonable. Like we force everybody to set requests and limits so we can have guaranteed quality of service and not have too much of a noisy neighbor problem, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. But like we don't really mandate a lot about the technologies they use. And instead we just kind of have had some like recommendations or input. And like I said, a lot of it we've wound up dealing with ourselves. Even before Go tool chains, we were wiring up Gimme so that we could auto install the right Go. And most projects have like maybe a make file or something. So like core Kubernetes, it's going to auto manage all of the dependencies and tooling you're using, but it can do that with a container, without a container. And we run both. The other thing that we've run into is I'm actually responsible for us having Docker and Docker in our CI. It was useful, but it's something that is always a headache. Same thing with kind and running clusters that way. Like we I try to nudge people to like if they really have a good use case for it, use it, fine. But wherever possible, we're avoiding it. So for example, our automated builds have some glue where we actually kick off a cloud build instead. And we kind of restrict you to just being able to kick that off in a cluster that is locked down, so that everybody's in this isolated environment. And if they want to run something like Docker build or build kit or whatever, we don't have to worry about like a container breakout to the host because they're in like we're using a SaaS that gives them a disposable VM where they have Docker for their build, and it's kind of similar. You have a little spec for I'm running this, and I think there's a run local tool. But again, most people don't really bother too much with that. It's just an environment that has like Go or something, and then drops into their make target, and they iterate more on their like maybe they do a little bit of initial config, but most of the time they don't wind up needing to. So maybe that's not the best way to develop, but I think that's where people are at. And so something like, oh, I need to iterate on the image that I'm running in just isn't a really common ask. It's usually things like how the pod is configured or something.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what was in that image, but if it rarely changes, then that's less interesting. You know, I was picturing maybe, custom end-to-end testing scenarios, right? That's kind of where a lot of the mess starts unraveling.
Yeah,
it's a pretty common place where people start using Dagger because it's usually you just put a little bit of Dagger where it helps, and then you just kind of wrap it in your existing stuff.
Right. We have some opinionated tooling for end-to-end testing because we had a big problem with people leaking resources. So we have some tooling that's like, if you want to do end-to-end testing, you can write your tests and insert it here, or you can write your bring up a cluster here, but there's like an overall, like it's a command line that orchestrates doing this. And we strongly recommend, please use this tool. One of the things it does is it integrates with a system that rents GCP projects or AWS sub-accounts. And then when you're done or your job times out or it stops heart beating or something, we have a backup system to just like nuke everything in the project afterwards, because it was a really common occurrence. So like people bring their own end-to-end test tooling and they spin up a bunch of external resources, and then the test gets terminated early for some reason and they don't clean up. So we've put a lot of effort into how do we make sure we don't leak resources. And so we provide some tools for, I'm doing an end-to-end test workflow. How do I orchestrate this?
Is there a lot of local end-to-end testing using kind or equivalent? Like a lower fidelity testing of whatever feature you're developing?
There's a bunch of that, and in that case, we have some recommendations, but it's less common to use the overall tool. For the like cloud end-to-end testing, you tend to use kubetest 2, or there's something still on kubetest, and that handles the lifecycle with like cluster up, test build, whenever. With kind, we usually just ask people to add a little cleanup trap in their script, and then the image environment we're providing with Docker and Docker has some hooks to make sure that it handles the like term signal wrapping while wrapping the tests. And so they're typically rendering if they're running in Docker in an environment and they're running kind clusters that way, we have an entry point that you're supposed to run underneath, and that will make sure that everything gets terminated, and that mostly works. And then then they use whatever tooling they want to like wrap setting up the kind cluster or something. And sometimes they're like importing it as a library into their Go tests and spinning it up in their test suite. It varies a lot.
So it's sort of you give them some options, and then there isn't like a mandatory test suite they have to run
right
locally and copy paste the output or something like that.
We pretty much let projects do whatever they want until they're doing something that's going to like actively harm our other users. So for like if you're doing cloud end-to-end testing, then we're really going to push you to use some tooling that makes sure that we'll like automatically clean everything up, and we just have hooks for like bring your own tests. But if you're doing things like locally scoped in your container, then we kind of just do whatever you want, and people are bringing their own tools, or they're even using GitHub Actions, or and we honestly don't even know what all of it is because the scale, there's just too much to pay attention to. So we're mostly paying attention to the like problem cases.
If they're using GitHub Actions, does that bridge into Prowl on the back end? Like they'll forward events to Prowl, or no? It's just different silos.
Level
basically.
of integration, it's fairly decoupled. The merge robot has some awareness of it, and there was some attempts at making it so that you could like request re-triggering them, because it was kind of a gap, but just papering over integration a little bit. It's not like, Prow isn't asking GitHub to schedule them or something like that. And repos are mostly allowed to do what they want when it's not impacting the rest of the project. There's only a few hard requirements, like for example, you must use the CLA and like our automation for that. So you're also expected to be using the merge robot as a way to enforce that sort of thing, but it's not super strongly enforced. So like CLA, or like, there's rules about dependencies allowable in CNCF projects, but like if people want to do things with infrastructure, as long as it's not going to create like cost or stability issues for the rest of the project, then like we have things that will actively help you with, but we're not going to like tell you can't use something else.
Right.
But like, for example, if projects started adopting Dagger and they're like, we want to run the Dagger engine as a like something deployed on the clusters, then like we'd have to evaluate that. But if it's like they're running some locally scoped stuff, sure.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. Well, I don't know, Madhav, you were there when we were talking. I don't know if there's an angle I'm missing here of something useful that we could do. It seems like the answer is not really, or not on the central infra side. Like, kind of a contributor, a project could try using it.
I feel like if a project
execution.
wants to try using it, that could be good. I don't know where we'd identify one, or how good the fit is. Like I said, I mean, most of the people that are here are trying to keep the infrastructure running for everyone else, but like I'm not necessarily developing the like test running for like customize or something.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily attending this meeting.
Yeah, it's interesting because
it just got so big.
Yeah. Plus you guys this is all volunteer work, right?
Yeah. I mean, SIG testing at this point doesn't have a lot of like, we don't really have FTE. Like, people are just participating here because, like, for example, Antonio works on GK networking, and testing is necessary for developing this stuff, but it isn't really like an org priority.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing infra.
Yeah, I think Ben covered a lot of the aspects that we were sort of speculating about that day when we were all talking. But what I was sort of more curious about, and maybe it would be interesting to see in the future, is how projects who are currently using GitHub Actions maybe use something like Dagger, because GitHub Actions is sort of a gray area for a lot of the repos right now. I'm not sure where Dagger would stand. I would need to sort of look into it a little more, but the reason we even allow GitHub Actions is because it's familiar to people and it's super low effort to set up, and plus you can offload the small things over there off of Prow essentially.
Yeah, it's not, we're not paying for it, which is helpful.
Exactly. Yeah,
right.
But
this is a small detail.
Yeah, but I would be interested to see projects try that out. I do know a couple of smaller community projects who rely on GitHub Actions where they might be interested in Dagger, and I'll try and start a thread with them. Solomon, I don't know if you are on the Kubernetes Slack, but if at all you are, I can just add you in that thread so that you can keep an eye.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think I am, but I'm happy to join it. Yeah. I mean, it's very common for us to, usually there's a trigger for using Dagger because you don't start with Dagger. Usually you run into a problem and then you use it as a balm, to make the pain go away, but without changing your existing stack. So we're always like, we bend over backwards to kind of fit in an existing stack. So obviously Dagger on GitHub Actions is a very, very common configuration. One trigger is when you start having multi-CI silos. You have, usually it's not Prowl, but usually it's something like Jenkins and GitHub Actions, and then there's an acquisition and there's some GitLab DAO. And people are like, great. We can't. First, there's a war to try and standardize everyone on one thing, and then that kind of doesn't work. And then you sort of there's a sort of a movement to just move as much as possible to dry land, which is portable shell scripts. So you can try and reuse the scripts across the different CIs, and then you run into the limitation that, Bash and POSIX are old and you have to redo everything with duct tape. So that's the pattern where Dagger usually comes in. Like, it's basically that pattern. It's moving as much logic as possible above the CI, so you can run it outside of CI, locally, and also across CI silos if you have them. So I guess in this case, it would be bridging GitHub Actions and Prowl, maybe.
I think the things that we need to bridge between those are a little bit different. But if we have people using actions that you think would be a good fit, Madhav, I think it would be great to have them take a shot at this and kind of report back if it's something that we feel we want to recommend. And
Yeah,
it's
for
still just gonna
sure.
be a recommendation. The gaps that we have are kind of different. It's things like with Prow and the merge robot, we have some guarantees about we've tested the latest of the code in the target branch and the latest of the code in the PR together before we merge, and because it controls the cloning and records that information. It's a little bit unusual, but we found that pretty necessary for projects like the main Kubernetes repo, because even if you don't have merge commits, you can have logical merge conflicts where we merge feature A and then we have feature B and the code compiles and it runs, but if you actually test them together, those changes, it doesn't work. So we make sure that we also have some ability to do batch testing and things, but it's all built around, we want to know that whatever we're running before merge has actually run on the state that the repo will be in when it's merged. And that's something we're not able to really wire into GitHub Actions currently. I think that's more of because they just punt on cloning and that's arbitrary code. So that one's a little bit.
Is it because of the single repo nature of GitHub Actions? Like, they do one checkout of one repo and then that's what you get, and that's the only.
My understanding is that Actions doesn't actually even have checkout. Checkout is itself an action,
Yeah,
so it's
yep.
arbitrary code.
So
In
there's
Prowl,
actually a great
cloning is not arbitrary. We control the clone step.
Oh, see, it's the opposite. You don't want you want the infra to be in control of exactly which.
Well, we want to be able to record what was tested, and then the merge robot can be aware of this and say, oh, when you tested this, that was actually at an older commit. So we need to run the tests again before we merge, because even though this looks like something that we could merge, it wasn't actually tested in the state the repo will be in when we click merge.
I see.
Cole?
So Prow has solved this in a way that is easily portable to GitHub Actions, or at least should be relatively easily portable. In particular, it's solved with a clone refs container that does this checkout. And because GitHub Actions allows you to provide an arbitrary clone step, you can just use this clone refs container, and it will follow the exact same checkout semantics that Prow would. I think the catch is that you would have to kind of somehow enforce that everybody using GitHub Actions is using this special clone step and not something else. But if that's used, then you can get the same kind of behavior.
Yeah, I just meant that it's a data plumbing issue, less a what like I don't think like Dagger isn't positioned in that spot. I don't think the problem we have is the communication between them and the awareness of what's being cloned. And so like it's a solvable problem, but solving it probably looks more like Cole just mentioned we could do like a custom step or something.
The enforcement is a huge issue in GitHub Actions in general. Like there is, you have a really wonky API over there, which changes without notice, and there's no enforcement provided for
People could
anything.
already run arbitrary clones and Prow. It's less enforcement and more like providing the tooling. Like because Actions doesn't communicate anything about cloning to the merge robot can't try to cooperate with it. But nothing stops someone from doing something goofy in their CI tests and like cloning something else entirely later. You could do that, but you're just shooting yourself in the foot. It's not.
Yeah, that's exactly what scares me, because there's been a few incidents from the GitHub admin side with things like that, right? But I'll definitely need to study a little bit more about Dagger. But if we can somehow cross communicate using Dagger for things like this, it could be really helpful in my opinion.
I think I'm following. Well, yeah, I guess the trigger for reaching for Dagger often is, if you're going to reach for a 200 line bash script or more, then that's probably when evaluating Dagger as an alternative makes sense. That's really its purpose. When you start having too much glue and yeah, this is better glue. Anyway, I appreciate you answering my questions and indulging. I don't want to take up too much of the time with Dagger specifically, but I'm learning a lot.
No, this is really interesting. Thanks for sharing. I'm gonna send you pointers to some of the other tools we have just for reference. But I think it seems like at this point we're really more talking about, okay, find the projects that are winding up growing into that bash and let them take a look at if they want to use this instead.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see how that works out for some of those projects and keep an eye going forward.
Do you have a project in mind that for example, that's in this situation with GitHub Actions and maybe straddling both the centralized tools and some DIY at the same time? Well, anyway,
I think Madhav sounds like you have a good idea of some next pointers, I think.
Yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head, but I know there is a couple of repos that are trying to do this for sure. I'll take an AI on that and I'll follow up for sure. Thanks.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks for presenting. All right. Unless there's any other questions on that, sounds like we have some next steps to go on regarding Dagger. So I think, Cole, you had an announcement about the press source migration.
Yes, just announcing that that's happening, planned for April 9th. If you have any open PRs against Prow, or if you depend on any Prow libraries, this will affect you. So check the issue there to see what you need to do. There's also a notice that went out on Slack and on the SIG-Testing mailing list, so that should have all the info you need. Yeah, basically, maybe don't work on Prow on April 9th if you were otherwise, because there's going to be some churn then. But yeah, main takeaway.
Ricky?
Yeah.
Will there be a transition period for that Prow migration? Like I've got some things that import Prow. Will they break on April 9th, or will they not?
That's a good question. I think if you are, I don't think anything will break. It'll break next time you do like a Go module update. If you're depending on the Go, you're saying you're depending on the Go modules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So assuming that you still have the same pinned versions of the Go modules, nothing is going to break until you go and update those. But when you do go to update those, you will need to do a find and replace. And that issue includes like a sed command that you can run. And we kept all of the repo relative paths for the Prow source code the same. So it's just a find and replace of like the repo name, essentially. Or the
Awesome,
module
thanks.
name, I guess is the correct thing to say.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, there's potentially some more cleanup to do in the Prow repo once we're done, because we kind of just tried to do a very simple move so that there was minimal chances for breaking changes during this transfer step. So there might be some more cleanup, like Ben has been mentioning, that we need to change how we're doing image publishing, and we want to kind of clean up some of the there's kind of some of the import paths are going to have prow/prow because prow is the repo name, and then there's a prow directory. So we want to kind of clean up some of those things.
Yeah, that's my PSA. If anybody has bandwidth to look into, Prow is still just publishing to a staging GCR, and it's not promoted or anything. So GCR is slated to go away in less than a year. I mean, it was a year announcement, but it's been a little while now. And we have registry.k-studio that you can publish things to, but you can't just direct push there. You have to promote images. Prow has not been in the habit of promoting images. That's bad for other reasons. Like, it means that we're getting a bunch of bandwidth to like a single region GCR, which is just not cost effective, which is why we don't do it that way. But it will be more involved. So there'll probably be another transition at some point where people will need to start consuming images from some other publishing, because even if we don't switch to image promotion, we have to do something else within the next less than year, because GCR is going away as a product. You would at least have to switch to artifact registry. For the rest of the project, that's kind of a different story, because they are publishing promoted images to the production registry, which we've already converted to artifact registry and other tooling behind the scenes. So if their staging registries get interrupted, it's not a big deal because no one's should be consuming from those. But Prow is using the staging registry as the only way that things are published. We need to do something about that. So it's not strictly related to the move, but as we're shifting things around, it's probably a good time to start thinking about that. Because also, if we punt that one a bit, and like, what is it, March next year, we're going to find that no one can pull those images anymore. Something.
Yeah, I left a comment on the issue just during this meeting, actually. I don't know that I'm going to have the bandwidth to do that myself, but I totally agree that's it shouldn't be a huge amount of work, I guess. It is a number of steps to kind of set up the new thing, and we can set it up in parallel, right? But yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a ton of work up front, but like whoever is going to be working on the like new Prow repo should probably come up with some plans for how to switch publishing the images.
Well, there's no difference in the new Prow repo in terms of publishing or anything like that. I literally just changed like the repo name on the post submit job.
Absolutely, but the splitting it out to another repo suggests that people are interested in developing Prow specifically. Whoever is developing Prow specifically, it is a pending problem that the way the images are published is not going to keep working. So it should be a little bit clearer when we've split it out who's still working on this, and then between whoever's working on this, we need to sort something out. Otherwise, I mean, there's not going to be much point in having a rebuild because we're not going to have published builds. Yeah. The other PSA I have is just Ricky's been working on a tool that identifies the jobs to migrate from the lingering still internal stuff to the public build clusters, so we can finally move the control plane to running in the project owned accounts. There's actually a lot of jobs in there, and we're not quite at the point where the tooling is being like auto run and published. There's a job in practice. Ricky's been doing a ton here. If someone else wants to help out, that would be a really great spot to help out in SIG-Testing right now. Getting that automatically published and circulating it to the community and helping highlight which jobs need looking at. I've been taking a look at SIG-Testing's jobs and also just trying to comb through it and figure out who might own these and what needs doing, but we could use more eyes on that. There's still a decent number of things that need migrating. From SIG-Testing's perspective, the last thing that we have left that is our own infrastructure is Kettle. So I have a PSA going in a Slack for finding who's using that and interested. We need to plan how to migrate this. But if anybody remembers information about how that actually runs or is interested in this, then also please join in. There's a thread in SIG K-Sempra. but that's ultimately like a SIG testing operated tool. And it's partially running on Prow, so we need to figure out migrating it before we can finish the Prow migration.
Okay, so just to be clear, Kettle, the Kettle job is blocking control plane migration.
That, or we will have to, get rid of the job, which will mean Kettle won't be functional.
I'm assuming that moving the actual job is the easy part. We can run that in a different cluster or something like that. But I'm guessing that there's tables involved or something like that.
The problem is that, what the job does is interact with things that Kettle is doing. Kettle itself runs in its own Kubernetes cluster. It has a bunch of stuff in BigQuery. It has data on a big disk in Kubernetes. I think it's a SQLite. I haven't dug too deep yet, but there's a bunch of moving parts for Kettle. Those are all running in an internal project. I just got access to that because we had already lost continuity on it. It was Aaron and Kubernetes Inchprod, which aren't at Google anymore. Jeff Grafton still had access and works in Chrome OS privacy now and was able to grant myself access. I also added Jordan Liggett as a user just to have a fallback in the project. But like that's where we're at with these things we haven't moved. We need to get them moved so we can maintain continuity in the project and anybody can engage with them. Kettle is something I think people are using a lot. For those who aren't familiar, it's part of a pipeline that we have that ultimately collects all of our failure messages from CI and does clustering on them so that you can look at common failure modes that are starting to crop up across the tons of end-to-end test jobs and things we have. Kettle is the first part of that pipeline that's collecting all of the failure logs and sort of collating them. And that's still running in like some random google.com project that we need to figure out what's running there and make a plan to spin it back up running in a SIG-K Infra account. So we don't run into like the only reason we can get access is because Jeff still works here many years later. Like we need to avoid that.
I could potentially help out with that during some of my SIG testing time as well.
And just
My lesson.
Ricky has a tool in Test Infra. It's in Hack that gives you the cluster migration report. That tool could use some more love and getting automated into CI. There's a work in progress job that he's been working on. If you also run the tool and look at the output, then you can see like what jobs are left. We know about vSphere and Azure stuff. We need to get credits from those companies sorted out. But there's a bunch of other things that are less clear. Like, for example, I found CFL Fuzz or the Kettle job. There's some things for the Slack automation for the project where we need to like identify those and go chase down people and make sure they understand that like we are shutting down the default cluster in August. We need to sort out moving them. We're not going to keep blocking the control plane migration forever. We want to get everything running in the project, but there's some jobs that are still subject to being left behind. We don't sort it out. I think we're going to have to work with Kate Simfer to keep driving that. It doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of uptick from people actually actively checking themselves if their jobs are migrated, even though we gave pretty straightforward instructions for that. I think we really need to do the approach Ricky's been going where we generate the report, we're looking at the report, and we're reaching out to people. So we could always use more help with that.
Sounds good. For what it's worth, for a couple of the jobs that you mentioned, we might not need to move some of those. Like we should kind of evaluate if all of them are still relevant, I guess, just before we go about moving them. Like the Slack reporter might not be relevant if we no longer have a Google-based on-call since we're switching to Kate's Infra.
Yeah. I've been trying to find and turn those down. I don't think there are any left. But
okay.
If you find one, then absolutely. Like there are things, for example, we still had CFL Fuzz stuff, and like the project isn't actually using that, so I turned that down.
Yeah, that's the other one I was going to mention. I didn't think that was used at all. So yeah, perfect.
We aren't using that. That was just a demo. But we still have. So for example, Slack. There's something that like checks there's like a pre-submit that checks the config for the Slack automation. That one actually needs sorting out, and it has a secret. We need to go chase that down and work with Contrabex on that. I have a thread with Navarone, but like if there's anything else like that, just even figuring out what these things are actually using, because if they're in that report, it's because we think they're not going to be easy moves because they like depend on a secret that we don't have an equivalent in the new cluster. That's some random secret someone set up, like a Slack access cred or the kettle access or something like that. So we're gonna have to track those down and see what's there. For the other jobs, people are just moving them. Ricky's been coordinating that, and they're not in that report, and that's mostly done, right? Like if they're not in that report, they're almost all done.
Yeah. There's very few that are still outstanding.
But a few of them were ours. At this point, I think it's basically kettle. After turning down the cluster fuzz stuff yesterday. But there's a lot of jobs in the report, and he's looking over, and we want to help make sure that we're actually getting it like published and circulated, and that still needs work. But you can run it yourself, and you get a nice little markdown file you can look at and see like a table of the remaining jobs. Hack/cluster migration, is that it?
Yep.
In test infra. Thanks.
I have one last comment, or I guess this is about the dagger. I saw that there was a mention that this at one of the first discussion notes that this was going to work with Prow / Fano. Just FYI, I just recently deleted Fano because I thought nobody was using it, and it doesn't seem to be representative of how Prow jobs actually run with decoration and everything like that. So I just wanted to make sure that that's not a problem, because if it is, we can revert it, and figure something out. But I just was
yeah, we saw and cover that. They're looking for more like that. Fano sits in kind of a similar space of being able to run containers locally versus CI, and we discussed that like PJ Unkind is a thing. And
okay.
Yeah.
Well, just FYI, I recently deleted the Fano directory, so if that's needed, we might need to go back through the commit history or something.
No, I think we're good. Yeah, we were just looking for a way to help the fit in the existing stack, really. So, but
Cool.
yeah, thanks for the note.
Well, anything else on the actually, I guess I'll just throw in my thing because it's related. I forgot to do this last week because I was out for the end of it, but there is a draft for control plane migration of the Kate's Prow control plane to Community on Prow. That will take place over like later this year, but the draft I'm going to send out to the mailing list for approval. And basically like for the next 2 weeks, if people can review it and then note if there's anything that either looks drastically wrong, looks like there's technical blockers, looks like there's things that we forgot to consider and really should like make sure that we hammer down before we go forward on one of these plans, please take a look at the doc and note that. And again, I'll send this out to the mailing list Slack as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think with that, we're at the end of the agenda. Is there anything else that folks want to discuss?
Still have about 10 minutes.
All right. If not, sounds like there are some action items that we have going forward around Dagger and then the like source code and control plane migration. So keep an eye on Slack and hope to see you all there continuing discussions. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining and thanks for the good discussions today.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.